Hi everyone. Recently I was surfing through Apple's website and I don't remember what I was searching for exactly, it doesn't matter, but I accidentally came up with an idea to create a tutorial based on the images that Apple uses to promote and sell their products. So my main goal is to show you different techniques and approaches you can use to create something similar with little equipment. Though I didn't try to completely recreate Apple's look, at least I've tried to bring my own perception. By the way, it's really down-to-earth scenario when a client comes to you and says, hey, I want you to photograph my items the Apple way, so you can easily do it. First of all, I decided to create a light modifier. The headphone's shape requires a custom solution because the material is shiny white plastic and it's also quite reflective. So as you can see, I cut a rectangular form out of a roll of backlit paper. This type of paper being used in outdoor advertising really often, and it's close to Savage transparent plastic or Roscoe filters. After that, I put 4 binder clips on both sides. Somehow I have to mount this construction on the table because it was falling without any support. So I decided to simply use a tape and stick those clips to the surface. That's a pretty straightforward solution, and probably the whole construction is not super solid, but it worked perfectly for my purpose. I added stripes of tape to the inner side as well. So that's how the whole construction looks like. Now I'm going to show you some props I used. This one is a soldering stank with clamps and magnifying glass, which I took off since I didn't need it. You can buy it on AliExpress for around 10 bucks, and I'll drop a link in the description if you're interested in that. The next thing is a plasticine. This is a regular plasticine for kids you can buy in numerous stores, so nothing to add here really. You also have to have a needle to stick it to the headphone. You gotta be really careful while doing that though. Here's the AirPods second version. You can get something similar for shooting if you just want to try the techniques. It's completely up to you. I also recommend you to use medicine gloves, since when you're going to touch the headphones or any electronics you're going to shoot, you will leave fingerprints on the surface and it will be really hard to remove during the post-production. So I highly recommend you to use such gloves and buy just a pack of them, because if you're going to shoot something like jewelry, you will also need them. Also try to shoot brand new items because you don't want to mess with dust and scratches and stuff like that. So the brand new item is the best item to shoot. If it's not possible, just try to clean it as much as you can. The headphone has to be positioned vertically, so I took a small piece of plasticine and attached it to the needle. Then I simply mounted in the clamp, otherwise the needle would be rotated around its axis under the headphone weight, so plasticine keeps it still. I did exact same thing for the headphone. It needs to be stick to the needle. One of the main advantages of using plasticine is that you can adjust the position easily, for example for some micro movements. Also, it doesn't hurt the surface of the device you photograph. It can easily be removed after the photo shoot without any traces on the surface. There are various solutions you can use though. There's a special wax for jewelry, for example, and I think I will cover it in some of my next videos. I put a black cover of the office folder as a background, and the construction clamp holds near the light modifier vertically. By the way, all the equipment I use will be available via the link in the description under that video, and if something will be missed, just ask me in the comments. So preparation part was done, and after that I started to bring in a camera and lighting to the set. I prefer to add light sources one by one to actually see what exactly is changing in the scene. I decided to work on the top part first, so I have to put my light somewhere there. And Manfrotto's magic arm is a perfect solution in this case, since I can adjust it in virtually any direction. S-type bracket is a perfect solution for off-camera flashes because you can attach any light modifier with bones mount to it. And there are tons of different options on the market for this type of mount. In this case I use Godox V850, this is non-TTL flash, and I use it with Godox FT16S sync kit to fire it remotely. It also allows you to control output power, so it's pretty handy since you don't have to even touch the back of the flash to adjust the power. As a light modifier I use a Godox snoot. It allows me to create a really tight spot on the backlit paper, thus I get a reflection on the product exactly where I need it. That's the result I got without any adjustments, and as you can see, it's slightly overexposed on the top, and as soon as I work on that exact part, I have to adjust the light accordingly. I also decrease highlight slider in Lightroom. It helps to bring down overexposed areas slightly, but it only works as an additional instrument, of course, so don't rely on this too much. I got the big picture in mind while I was creating a lighting setup, and overall I knew how the final result should look like. So it's easier to pre-visualize what you want to get at the end, even without details. So to create a nice highlight on the left side of the headphone, I added one more flash, but with a standard 7-inch reflector. This way the light comes softer than while using a snoot. The main disadvantage when you work with on-camera flashes is the lack of modeling light. You don't actually see how light would interact with the object before you make a shot. But the more you practice, the easier it becomes to know where exactly you have to put a light source. You can also try to use a flashlight to kinda emulate modeling light. Also keep in mind that when you add more lights to your scene, overall exposure might increase as well, so pay attention to the most critical areas. In this case, such areas are highlights on the top and on the left. Here's what I got so far. Nice gradient highlight on the right side is exactly what I needed. And of course I did a few attempts trying to catch that highlight. There is no short key, you just have to move the light around and make as many shots as you need till you're satisfied with the result. I had to adjust the light in order to slightly shift the top highlight lower. So I did it because I wanted to see more separation between the edge of the headphone and the actual highlight. So there comes more definition and volume, and you start actually to define more details. Such micro adjustments are really important if you want to create top-notch images. By the way, if you shoot with Canon and on-camera flashes like me, here's a little tip for you. If you want to focus using the back screen of the camera, you can switch to movie mode and then raise ISO and/or shutter speed. It depends on the overall lighting conditions at your studio, and then zoom in to better see what's going on there. And after that, as you set your focus, you can switch back to normal ISO and shutter speed. As you can see here, I started to add some custom light modifiers, and this is basically a piece of black plastic with the same material I use for the background, and I just cut out a narrow strip and mounted it to one of those office clamps, as you can see here. And the idea behind this is to bring more variety to the highlights on the right side, create some sort of separation and stuff like that. So basically to bring more definition. Same thing for the left side. I experimented a lot with the position of that black strip, and I don't want you to watch the whole process since it took me around half an hour till I found a sweet spot. So I'm just going to show you the final result I was happy with, and you will see in a moment that I created some sort of inverted V shape by those strips, and it gives interesting reflections on the top part, semicircle or something like that. I wasn't quite happy with the reflections near the black dot. By the way, I have no idea what that black dot does in terms of functionality, so let me know in the comments what's that for if you know. So I created a flag in order to fill that area, but pretty soon I realized that reflection looks ugly and messy regardless of how I move it around, and even worse than without any modifiers. So instead, that flag, I just put the narrow strip. That looked much better. And of course for each object, the shape would be different, the position would be different, so you just have to experiment. And of course it's important to evaluate your results and track the progress along the shooting, because not always more means better. And sometimes simple solutions work better than sophisticated approaches. So generally keep things simple and bring complexity only when it's really needed. You may probably think that the lower highly reflective part looks not appealing at all, and I'm with you on that. I could figure out how to make this part pretty, but actually I decided to make it in post in Photoshop, because in that case it will be less time consuming. As soon as I got the final image, I had to make it fully sharp, which is not possible when you use an aperture even like f11. So there is a common technique called focus taken when you combine shots with different focal planes and it becomes fully sharp. For that purpose I use Helicon Remote to create a stack and Helicon Focus to merge all shots together. The process is really simple if you have good sources. Most of the time I use default settings there and it does a great job. However, for some complex objects it would require to manually adjust certain layers inside the program, but again it's really simple to do. And that's probably another topic to discuss, and if you're interested in that, in more in-depth review, just let me know about it. I thought that I'll easily create a nice image of the case using the same lighting setup, Why not, right? So I put it on the wooden pedestal, mounted it with plasticine as I did it before. I took several shots and realized that the result is not quite what I want. I haven't had an ability to control highlights and reflections on the lower part of the case, and it was kinda annoying. I tried different positions. I tried to add small white cards near the bottom to bring in some cool lines, but eventually nothing worked. So I realized I had to build completely different setup, because that's what you do if you want to achieve the result you have in your mind. The new setup looks similar to the previous one, but with the object being shot top down. This way I had full control over the object. As the background I used same black plastic, I just put it on the floor. And I created a stand for the case from batteries for my camera. And also here you can see I wrapped same light modifier from the previous setup, but slightly differently. Now it fully covers the object inside it, and it's a great way to shoot jewelry as well, for example. And at least it could be a good starting point, as jewelry usually requires a bit more advanced setups. With a standard tripod, it's hard to position the camera right above the object, since it should be pointed down at 90 degrees and located above the scene. If you have many light sources around, it may cause difficulties as well. So a C-stand with an extension arm could be an option in this case. I took off central column from the tripod and attached it to the extension arm. If you don't have a C-stand around, you can try to use a regular stand with a Manfrotto magic arm, for example, but in this case you'll need some counterweight to avoid the whole construction from falling. Also, some people use two stands and a bar across them, but I think it can work when you have to cover a large area. For my small setup, a C-stand does a great job. And as you can see, I totally messed with the highlight, but on the other hand, I started to be closer to the result I want to achieve. So I had to readjust the position of that light, aim it a bit lower to bring that bright part higher. Now I can start to add the rest of light sources in a similar fashion, and overall, the lighting setup rhymes and repeats the previous one. I used two snoods and two reflectors again, and the way I photographed the case of those AirPods looks completely different from what you can see on Apple's website, and I think it's cool because this is my own interpretation, and I didn't have strict rules how I supposed to shoot that case. The object became really dirty while I was building the setup, and I had to clean it. There were too many dust particles, and with the macro lens they become even more visible. Finally, I put the circle inside to create additional volume, and here you can see how the final setup looks like. So I'm done with the shooting part, and now it's time to move to the post-production, where I will briefly explain how I put all parts together. I made basic adjustments in Adobe Camera Raw, slightly corrected the exposure, highlights and stuff like that. And later I continued to work with 16-bit file in Photoshop, correcting all imperfections. Certain areas are tricky to fix, so I use selections to avoid affecting the rest parts of the image. I was using simple instruments like clone stamp and healing brush. Working on an empty layer provides you a lot of freedom, so you can easily create as many layers as you want. I also fixed some gradients and highlights since they were not smooth enough. For the bottom part, I simply created different selections and painted them by a brush tool, and then added a structure to it using a noise layer with blue. As soon as I'm done the retouching process, I cut out the headphone by a pen tool, since this is the most precise method to do it, and then just simply added a completely black background. There was a lot of dust on the AirPods case, so I spent some time removing every single particle. I brought a couple of gradients to emphasize that some sort of pit or hole or whatever it is on the front surface. And finally, I just duplicated the headphone and reflected it horizontally, and then brought in the case. The crop was adjusted accordingly. By the way, I recommend to use 5:4 crop ratio, for example, if you're going to post your image to Instagram. Thank you very much for watching, and hit the like and subscribe to my channel if you found this video helpful. Share it with your friends, and also You can submit your images to my Facebook group, the link in the description. And if you need some help to improve your photography, I would be more than happy to do that. So thanks again, and I'll see you soon.